evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness in the highest levels of love light. It's a little chilly here. I just wanted to go into some flow. We've had some massive energy shifts. Let's just give a quick energy update and go into flow. Lots of upheavals in people's lives, lots of things coming to an end and beginning almost immediately, all at the same time here, now all at once. We've had these massive influx of solar flares. I'm finally hearing a lot of people talking about it. It wasn't something that was necessarily as mainstream as it is now. People are starting to talk about these things. I would invite everybody to just recognize that this is going to be, from my perspective, ongoing. And it is here to help us, not hurt us. If we are believing that a lot of the things that are here to hurt us, what that does is it creates that thought pattern, that energy, and we are then reflected back to us more things to feel unsafe about. So it is a good idea to not necessarily get drawn into any particular timeline prediction. That was another message that came through. Lots of timeline predictions, lots of predictions, and I'm not saying that people that predict are prophets or prophesizers or whatever we want to call these individuals. I've done it too, that can see or remote view or have clairvoyance or have the finger on the pulse, so to speak. We always are being invited to keep in mind that that information still has to come through a channel, a filtration system. And no matter how pure one person is or thinks they are, that doesn't mean that their interpretation of the message is necessarily 100% with no discrepancies, or I don't know if discrepancy is really the right word, but also in addition to that, just because they're tuning into a particular reality or timeline doesn't mean that that is the same reality or timeline that you and I are on. And that's difficult to understand in a linear perspective. But that is how I see things. Everything is a bubble within a bubble, a subset within a subset. And depending on where our vibration is consistently residing at, and I'm hearing resounding at, the sound of our energy signature, the vibratory frequency that we are consistently holding, that is what determines our timeline, our reality, our future. From one perspective, and from a bigger perspective, also our past. Because we're looking back at our past, holding this perspective. This isn't the only reason, but depending on how we feel when we look back at things, will determine our vibration in that moment connected to those experiences, thought patterns, or things, if that makes sense. So those are all little multi-dimensional kind of way to keep things in mind. And I already hear, well, if that's the case, what happens? I have been going through a lot of negative things and I feel upset and I feel fearful. So does that mean that's what I've now created for my future? And I would venture to say that if a couple of things, we have the potential to still change that at any time, even if we are on a particular course. In every moment, and those moments add up. And what I'm hearing is, again, I'm hearing a lot of things. Perpetuation, perpetual. How much are we perpetuating that energy? If we're having a bad day or a bad week, even, that happens. We're human. We're going to be going through difficult things. We are on Earth, and it is not necessarily all sunshine and rainbows. It is challenging at times, right? We are processing and integrating a lot, you guys. It's not that this is just going to be very easy, but it can be at certain times easier easier than others, even when we're going through something difficult. I'm going through my own challenges right now, and it would be untruthful for me to say that I'm always on my best behavior. I'm always in my highest, greatest vibration. I strive for that. I make that my intention. I do my best to create from that heartfelt coherence. But it isn't always something that I can maintain with no caveats, no little things that pop in and pull me in a different direction temporarily. And that's the key. Most of the time I feel compassion. Most of the time I can feel gratitude. And I also recognize when I'm not feeling those things. And I think that's the key component, is to know when we're not in that space, when we're not able to maintain that coherence consistently. That's when it's a good time to withdraw from the race, is what I'm hearing. Meaning, go within, meditate, and be open about what you're experiencing. You might have someone that doesn't understand why you need some alone time. You might have someone who is trying to get you to do something that maybe you realize that it's not going to be in your best interest. Other times, it might be a good idea to get out of hermit mode and try something new. Go do something that's different, that gives you the opportunity to shift your perspective for a few minutes. So it just depends on where each individual is at. And that, in essence, the more we can do that, the more we're aware of those things, the easier it is to create the frequency, therefore the future that we want to create, not the one we don't want to create. What is going on in the collective, I guess I'm doing an energy update. I'm in flow about this, but our patterns are resurging at a constant rate. This is what I'm hearing. So let me just maybe dip into this and see if I can go into a little flow about this. I'm being guided to finish that kind of thought pattern and then go into flow from there. I might even do it in a second video. We'll see what happens. But patterns are being recreated. And so what happens is it's giving us the opportunity to see them and go, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. Let's talk about one example, the pattern of war. So that energy, that timeline, that frequency, the fear and the trauma and the everything that goes along with that pattern of war is being brought up again. And that's one that's been continually tried to be brought up over and over and over again. And I could go into a lot of different channels about what that looks like, but let's just say that's an example. That's a collective pattern. A lot of collective patterns about who's right and who's wrong. A lot of collective patterns about victimization. All these things come up time and time again. History repeats itself, but it doesn't have to. It only repeats itself because we are in a habit of interacting, vibrating, and playing along with that particular game. Once you play along with it, then it becomes part of the collective experience. And so we could say it's an agreement. And when I say it's an agreement, it doesn't necessarily mean, for those of you out there who know about spiritual contracts and things like that, it's some kind of agreement that we have to complete or we have to follow because we've agreed to play in this game. I'm referring more in this case to, we are oftentimes collectively making that agreement unconsciously. So that's another video in of itself. So we're being invited to look at and ask ourselves, where are we unconsciously feeding a pattern in our own lives that may also be seen out in the collective? So let's just take war for an example. That is fear, right? So fear is not just being afraid of a person, place, or thing. It can be afraid of love. It can be a fear of what if. It can be afraid of not being able to, survival mode, the lower energy centers. It can be afraid of rejection, not all kinds of things. It's not like it's just one thing, but that is a frequency. And I've heard it said before, anything not in love is fear. And maybe that's true. So, excuse me. Right now I'm feeling the love for my coffee. Oh. I would venture to say that many people are picking up on a lot of the collective programming. A lot of us are feeling the ripple effect of the collective energies, in addition to all of the other energies that we're picking up on, because many of us have activated our not just multi-dimensional perception, but multi-sensations. So I'm going to call it multifaceted sensations that are beyond just the 3D basic feelings. We're using our senses, taste, touch, smell, sight, hearing. And then if you picture that being in the physical body, and then beyond that, we are oftentimes tapping into the beyond. We just don't realize it, or we didn't know that that's what we were doing. Now we're much more aware of it. So for some people, that is overwhelming. Other people are, and it can be overwhelming because it's heightened so much for them. And I know somebody out there watching this is like, yeah, I can't even go into the grocery store right now without picking up on other people's stuff. And I would venture to say that I've been there, done that, and it really requires practice. And it isn't always manageable, especially if we already feel frazzled and raw. I find when I'm able to kind of shut that down a little bit now, versus when I first started having these things happen. I was blown open chakra-wise. My crown burst open, my heart burst open. I had a Kundalini experience, several of them, and it was very challenging. And I know you guys might be going through that as well. What I'm finding is a lot of people are going through this, but they're going through it in bursts. So this too shall pass kind of thing. So recognizing that oftentimes we'll get that push in that Kundalini activation around auspicious, I guess that's the word, times, like heightened solar flare activity, heightened emotional surges through the collective, when we've been doing a lot of work. We've been eating really clean and going into our hearts with meditation. The difference is, if you haven't been doing the work, and this is not a place of judgment, let's say, well, some people it's just going to happen and they'll be fine. There's no side effects. Other people are going to go, what is happening? I'm freaking out. It is easier sometimes if you've been going into meditation, doing the heart-centered work, doing those kinds of things, because what happens is you can tune into your own stuff easier and separate your stuff from other people's stuff. I guess this is relevant. We're going to go there. Number one. Number two, because if you're continually doing the coherence, the heart work, that's back to what I said in the beginning, a consistent frequency check and practice. It's easier to feel into that space, the compassion. And and the peace and be able to feel more present. When we can't tune into our bodies and we can't be present with ourselves and our breathing and our emotions, that's when things get off, not just off track, but that's when things can become very distracting and disruptive in our lives, because it can be overwhelming. And if you're not experiencing that Kundalini experience of overwhelm, that's okay. This isn't something you're missing out on. Not everybody's going to feel it that way. I just feel like a lot of the things I've gone through in my life, as uncomfortable as they might have been, may have been on purpose, so that I could say, wow, that was palpable. Wow, that was difficult. That was fun. That was challenging. Whatever it is, it gives more flavor to the experience. And they haven't all been sunshine and rainbows. But look what I'm doing now. I'm able to share with you guys and communicate this stuff. And I do it all the time too when I'm working with other people. You know, I'm able to tune into their bodies and separate my stuff from their stuff and say, wow, Susie, I feel that maybe your nervous system is on complete overdrive, and you might want to consider XYZ based on what I'm seeing, interpreting, feeling, and tuning into. Do you want to have a conversation about that? Maybe, you know, and I'm just using that as a very basic example of how I use this for my work. Okay, so I guess that was relevant for what's going on in the collective. There's a lot of misconception about some of these teachings of the ancient texts, and that's something that I think more of us are actually having more understanding about, and we're able to interpret it and share it with each other in a much more manageable, digestible way. So that's also something to keep in mind, because I've also been asked, well, what is Kundalini? And this says this and that says that, and there's a lot of confusion out there around eat this, don't eat that, drink this, don't drink that, try this plant medicine, don't try. You guys, every single person is going to find their own, your own, my own way. There is not the way other than through the heart. That's it. Through that crysted frequency of love, gratitude, appreciation, forgiveness, which is even maybe a lower frequency than gratitude and appreciation, but I'm just throwing that into the mix because we are being called to find that. Sometimes we have to find forgiveness in our hearts to realize there's really nothing to forgive in some cases, because all we're doing is forgiving ourselves. And we can ask ourselves, what haven't I forgiven myself for? What is it in me that is making it impossible for me to forgive this other person? They may have done something that we don't find. Doesn't mean that means we're going to say, I forgive you, let's hang out tomorrow. It might mean that we just say, I'm forgiving myself, I'm letting this go, I'm finding compassion for this person, I realize we have nothing in common and I don't enjoy this person's company. So it's not hanging out and being fake. It just means we're starting to recognize things we want to participate in, people we want to interact with, and people that we don't. But we're being called not to go around hating those people that aren't necessarily like us. That's difficult for some of us. Wow, I guess we're covering a lot of topics this morning. So I'll do a second video potentially with the other stuff. And so we're being called to access, oh, here we go, I'm going into flow. As soon as I said that. We're being called to access this greater potential within our own chemistry set. We're being invited to play with this in such a way that we can access our fuller, and I keep hearing the word potential. So when you go into the heart space, sometimes there can be this pooling, this pool of energy to gather strength from. And this pools out, ripples out into the space around us through our bodies. Our bodies are the conduit of this energy and this frequency. We feel it and express this energy of heart frequency through our words, deeds, and actions and thoughts. So it's important to use our body. I'm hearing thy rod and thy staff shall comfort me. It's important to use our body as that conduit. And if we aren't allowing ourselves to feel our, compassion for ourselves, that is where it has to start. We are electrical, and our electricity is combining with all of the other fluids that are inside of this skin suit, which I've called technology, but our access to more is anchored through the heart. And we are anchored here on earth inside of a body that has the potential to bring through and send out many different signals. Much can be accessed through this divine connection. We find often that our hearts feel disconnected or too connected at times. This is a misconception. It is always accessible, yet we block ourselves through the layering up, if you will, of protection and density and things that we do to isolate ourselves from the source that we really are connected into at all times. So I'm being called, the other day I was just doing dishes and kind of in a place of contemplation and stressed, actually. And I had this visual pop into my head of being this cell, and I've talked about this before, but it was not just the visual. The visual allowed me to drop in and feel more of what I was seeing intuitively, but I was just visualizing the Milky Way as a body or a container. And that I just was pretending, like, what if that body or container, let's say, is God or source energy, as an example. And here we are on Earth, right? This is how big we are compared to all of that. But we're not outside of it. We're inside of the Milky Way. The way. This is the way. We're inside of that. So I always see that as us being inside this body of God. And but we just feel like and I had this overwhelming just sense of a lot of things. A lot of emotions came up, a lot of feelings of feeling silly for thoughts I'd had. Lots of emotions came up for appreciation and gratitude. So let me go back to this. We develop a layer, and this is where many people are not realizing their hearts are under pressure. I'm being shown a sleeve that you put something in, and then you wrap that sleeve up, and let's say it's your hand, and we're going to use this as a reference to the heart. And all of a sudden it does this because it's wrapped up in this sleeve, and it can't expand and it can't contract. It always feels like it's being not held, forced, pressure. There's always this sensation of tightness wound around the heart, when in actuality, the heart is meant to expand and be breathable, morphing and growing these fibers of light. I always see roots around the heart, these little tiny fibers, like little tiny plant roots. And those hairs on the heart are meant, like the hairs on the head, to breathe. They're meant to interact with oxygen. I'm just in flow right now. They're meant to interact with all of the body and the systems in the body so that it can be a symbiotic relationship, so that it can be held and not crushed. Many people are having their hearts taxed right now, and that's a play on words. What I'm seeing is that they're paying taxes, dues. So this has to do a little bit with when you pay taxes on something, you're giving energy and you're giving value to something that has a perceived power over you, which we all do this, right? Because this is the reality that we've agreed to, back to agreements. But we no longer have to agree to pay homage, play on words, to something or someone that isn't above us. We are all, I'm just hearing that we're all part of source energy and love. So this is a play on words, and I'm going to play with this for a minute. When we are putting pressure on ourselves to be something that we're not, to interact in a way that isn't natural for us, to take a break is what I'm hearing. And I'm hearing the song Under Pressure. Take a break and recognize that our bodies are not necessarily gosh, you guys, I actually have seen a lot of heart issues lately. I'm sure you guys have too. And we're really being called to support the heart. So the heart is under attack from one perspective. I remember working with someone years ago, this just popped into my head, and when I did the energy work with this particular individual, I knew that if this person didn't start to relax, they were going to have a heart attack. I felt the tightness in their chest. And where it was coming from was stress from work. That was one thing. But it was also coming from trauma from their childhood and fear that they hadn't, a lot of fears they hadn't dealt with. So this person has gone through significant amounts of energy work, and they're not someone I would ever necessarily assume that would be interested in energy work. They've done a lot of work on their fascia, and I'm bringing this up because the heart is wrapped in other layers. So we've got to, I'm being called to really talk about this. Hydrate the fascia. So breath work, breathing. Are we drinking enough water? It's not just about stretching. It's actually about moving in a certain pattern to help open up that sleeve so that we aren't compressing so much of the time and putting our body into a non-alkaline state is what I'm hearing. So that's also the other message that comes through a lot is get alkaline. Try not to be so acidic. Try to keep yourself in a place of, the other word I get a lot is reverence. Have reverence for the body. Have reverence for our cells. Have reverence for earth, for our fellow humans, for the animals. All of that is a sense of gratitude. It's a sense of respect and appreciation, and it's a feeling. It's a feeling. So if you can't feel, that's most likely sometimes because of that sleeve. It creates a disconnect. Even though it's not real, it actually is, I don't know if the word I want to use is real, but it actually is, I don't even know if palpable. You can feel it. So I went through a series, and this also too, heavy metals, parasites. Parasites can create this lining around the gut that keeps the heart from working at its optimal speed, so to speak. All right. Just going back into flow. I don't have a pause button. When we remove this sleeve, or better spoken, dissolve it through bringing these other frequencies and energies or sound to break away or chip away at this sleeve that's been placed around the heart for whatever reason, whether it be protection, fear, shame, doubt, particular foods, things we've put into the body that may have created sensations in other areas instead of the heart. We invite, when we open this up, it creates a flood of awareness that increases the sensations, or the sensationalization, play on words, sensations and realization of this unified connection. And once that unified connection is established, that channel is opened, it is easier to move back and forth, play on words, to then signal to this higher frequency the request for fill in the blanks, activation, understanding, all of the things that we think we're seeking outside of ourselves. And we flower from the inside out. The nectar is then pollinated. The whole body is pollinated by the nectar. That is the flower, the succulent, if you will, inside the channel or the vessel of the heart. This is etheric and literal, because the physical body then is able to adapt and hold on to a charge. This adaptation or evolution is something that is innate and yet has not been accessed by many. And now is the time. So if we can lay aside our hostilities, and this is a play on words, I'm being called to recognize how close the word hostility and hospitality are. Hospitality. Hostile reality versus hospitality. We can recognize how close we all truly are. And once this happens, we still maintain our individuality and what we wish to create and how we communicate and what our individual life paths are. Some will choose to be doctors and some will choose to work on the architecture of homes and buildings, and others will choose to beautify the earth and work with her crops and flowers, and on and on and on and on. It does not change the fact that we each have a unique and individual expression or fingerprint. Yet this heart is then woven into the fabric of our very existence. We become unified as a collective on this path, and this creates an ability for us to unify in the future. For we are then doing it now, opening up that channel, and this is reference to back to the first part of this video, opening up that channel for clarity, clairvoyance. We can clearly see where we are voyaging to, where we have voyaged from, and we move into a place of the dance rather than the avoidance. We become able to move into the creative void, dancing with it in unification with our heartstrings. We then play the chords that stir up the channels in the body and flood the senses with this innate awareness. This awareness is termed or coined many different things. This goes back to the word value, coined, taxes. So we're finding a new value system, and we're not necessarily obligated to work with the old system in the same way, because once we open up that heart channel, our values change. How we interact with our reality changes. Therefore, we're able to see more value in things we wouldn't have otherwise noticed. This includes each other. I could keep going, but I'm on a little bit of a time limit. So I'm just going to end on that note, and I hope someone found this helpful. I'm sure there will be more about this, because I've channeled information about the heart a few times that I haven't really gone back to reread. And from my perspective, there's something going on in the human body that is actually evolving. And this is a literal like string or energy or fiber, hair that has grown out of the hearts of many. And it's almost like something about this is going to be talked about maybe years to come. There's a new part of the heart that we've just discovered. We didn't know this existed. And it might have been there the whole time, but because it was up in his sleeve, it wasn't able to unfold and open. There's like a petal in there that it got stuck, and it was never quite seen, or hadn't shown itself yet, is what I'm being shown. And this is fascinating to me. And this is where I'm being called to recognize that some of you guys are getting information about the future, about the body, and not everybody's going to get it, you guys. Not everybody's going to understand or agree. And that's just something else to keep in mind. It doesn't matter if they are going to understand or they are going to agree. If we get upset over that, then there went our frequency. That's the direction our frequency went into. And there is that unconscious patterning that we don't even realize that we're following, if that makes sense. So that's just something to be aware of. In love and light, guys. Namaste.